something is happening inside Iran right now that the whole world needs to stop and pay attention to. A decision has been made, a throne has been passed, and the man who is about to sit on that throne did not earn it the way the rules say he should have. He was simply born to the right father. That is the story. 30 years is supreme leader Ali Khamenei, the most powerful man in Iran, the man whose word is final, the man no president, no general, no cleric can overrule. And now that seat, that enormous, terrifying seat of power, is being quietly, carefully, and very deliberately handed to his own son. Not because Mojtaba fought for it, not because the people voted for him, not because religious scholars across Iran gathered and agreed he was the most qualified man alive, but because of blood, because of family story, because what is unfolding inside Iran right now is going to affect oil prices, nuclear talks, Middle East tensions, and the daily lives of millions of ordinary Iranians who never got a vote on any of this. This channel covers the stories the mainstream rushes past. Subscribe right now and hit the bell, because this is only part one, and what comes next will shock even the people who think they already know Iran. To understand why this moment is so explosive, one must go back and understand how Iran's system of leadership is supposed to work. Because on paper, it is not supposed to work like this at all. When Iran became an Islamic Republic in 1979, the founding fathers of that revolution built a system where the supreme leader is not chosen by birth. He is not chosen by family name. He is chosen by a body of senior religious scholars called the Assembly of Experts. These are men who are supposed to look across the entire landscape of Islamic scholarship in Iran, study the candidates, weigh their knowledge, weigh their piety, weigh their leadership qualities, and then select the most deserving man. That is the rule. That is what is written. That is what Ayatollah Khamenei, the father of the revolution himself, put in place when he built this system from the ground up. But rules are only as strong as the people who enforce them. And right now, sources close to the Iranian government, opposition figures living in exile, and international analysts watching Iran closely are all saying the same thing. Mojtaba Khamenei is being positioned quietly, carefully, strategically. The groundwork is being laid, favors are being called in, loyalists inside the Assembly of Experts are being aligned, and when the time comes, when the elder Khamenei can no longer hold the seat, his son will be ready and waiting. This is not a rumor from the street. This is a pattern that observers have been tracking for years. Mojtaba has been growing his influence inside Iran's most powerful religious and military circles. He has deep ties to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, which is not just a military force, it is a financial empire, a political machine, and the most feared institution inside Iran. Whoever controls the IRGC controls Iran. And Mojtaba Khamenei has been building that bridge carefully for a very long time. If someone is only seeing this story for the first time, do not let it end here. Subscribe to this channel, because the deeper this story goes, the more it becomes clear that what is happening in Iran is not just about one family. It is about the future of an entire nation. Now here is where it gets even more interesting. Because the critics are not just speaking from outside Iran. They are not just Western governments or foreign journalists pointing fingers from a safe distance. Some of the loudest voices questioning the succession are coming from inside Iran itself, from within the very religious establishment that is supposed to uphold the rules of the Islamic Republic. Senior clerics, men who have spent their entire lives inside the Iranian system, men who have supported the revolution, men who believe deeply in the concept of Islamic governance, are privately, and sometimes not so privately, expressing serious discomfort with what they are watching unfold. And their argument is simple, powerful, and very hard to dismiss. They are saying that turning the position of supreme leader into something that passes from father to son is not Islamic governance. It is a monarchy. It is the very thing the 1979 revolution was supposed to destroy. It is the very system that Ayatollah Khamenei stood up against when he helped bring down the Shah of Iran and his dynasty. Think about that for a moment. The Islamic Republic was built on the bones of a monarchy. The whole foundation of the revolution was the rejection of one family holding all power and passing it down through bloodline. And now, decades later, critics are saying the republic is becoming the very thing it claimed to defeat. That is a dangerous accusation inside Iran, and the people making it know the risks they are taking by speaking up. Because in Iran, dissent is not free. Journalists disappear. Clerics who speak too loudly find themselves stripped of influence. Activists end up in even prison, one of the most feared detention centers in the entire world. The space for open criticism of the supreme leadership is razor thin, and yet the criticism is still coming, because what is at stake is too big to stay silent about. Mojtaba Khamenei is not a man who lives in the public eye. He does not give speeches on television. He does not hold press conferences. He operates in the shadows of Iranian power, which itself tells a story. A man being prepared for the highest office in the land who the Iranian public barely knows by face. 90 million people. And their next potential supreme leader is a ghost to most of them. That alone should make anyone watching this stop and think very carefully about what kind of leadership transition is quietly being engineered behind closed doors in Tehran. Stay locked in. Subscribe if this channel has not been subscribed to yet. Part 4 is coming, and that is where the international consequences of this story crack wide open. Now let us zoom out, because this story does not stop at Iran's borders. Not even close. What happens inside that supreme leadership seat sends shockwaves across the entire world, and the governments in Washington, Tel Aviv, Riyadh, and Brussels are all watching this succession question with extreme attention. Here is why it matters so much beyond Iran. The supreme leader of Iran is not just a religious figurehead. This is the man who controls Iran's nuclear program. This is the man who decides how far Iran pushes its uranium enrichment. This is the man who gives the final word on whether Iran walks into a negotiating room or walks away from one. Every deal, every threat, every red line, it all traces back to that one seat of power. And right now the world is already sitting on a powder keg when it comes to Iran's nuclear ambitions. International inspectors have been raising alarms. Enrichment levels have been climbing toward weapons-grade territory. Talks have stalled. Tensions between Iran and the United States have been running dangerously high. Israel has made clear repeatedly and loudly that it will not allow Iran to become a nuclear-armed state. So into all of that tension, imagine dropping a new supreme leader, a man shaped entirely by his father's worldview, a man with deep roots in the Revolutionary Guard, a man who has never had to answer to the public, never had to justify a policy, never had to sit across the table from a foreign diplomat and negotiate anything. That is the man who could soon have his finger on the most sensitive decisions in one of the most volatile regions on the planet. And it is not just the nuclear question. Iran's influence stretches across the entire Middle East like a web. Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, the Houthis in Yemen, militia forces in Iraq and Syria. All of these groups receive funding, weapons, and strategic direction that traces back to Tehran, back to the Revolutionary Guard, back to the supreme leader. Whoever sits in that chair next does not just rule Iran, they shape the Middle East, they influence oil markets that affect fuel prices in every country on earth. They hold cards in conflicts that have already cost hundreds of thousands of lives. This is why the word Nepo baby, a term the internet uses lightly for celebrities who got famous because of their parents, hits so differently when it is attached to this story. Because this is not a film role. This is not a record deal handed to a famous person's child. This is the control of nuclear decisions, regional wars, the fate of 90 million people who are already living under enormous economic pressure because of international sanctions. The ordinary Iranian citizen wakes up every morning dealing with a currency that has collapsed in value, inflation that has eaten away at savings, shortages of medicine, young people leaving the country in waves because they see no future. And through all of that, the question of who leads them next is apparently being settled not by merit, not by popular will, not even by the religious process the system claims to follow, but by the fact that one man happened to be born to the river. Beneath every political calculation being made by generals and clerics and foreign governments, there are real human beings, mothers, fathers, students, workers, young women who took to the streets not long ago and risked everything, their freedom, their safety, their lives, to demand a different kind of Iran, to demand to be seen, to demand that their voices count for something. Those protests shook the Iranian government to its core. The whole world watched, and the whole world saw how the government responded with force, with arrests, with a crackdown that sent a very clear message that the people at the top were not ready to loosen their grip. Not even slightly. And now, in the middle of all that unresolved tension, the succession question is being quietly answered in the most tone-deaf way imaginable. Not with openness, not with a process the public can trust, but with a son, a shadow figure, a man being slid into position like a piece on a chessboard that most Iranians were never invited to play. History has a pattern that repeats itself with remarkable consistency. When a government stops listening to its people and starts protecting only its own bloodline, the pressure builds. It builds slowly sometimes, quietly, underground. And then one day something cracks, and everything changes faster than anyone predicted. Iran has been at that kind of crossroads before. 1979 proved that a seemingly untouchable system can collapse when enough people decide they have had enough. The leadership in Tehran should know that better than anyone. They built their entire republic on that exact lesson. But power has a way of making people forget the lessons that brought them to power in the first place. Mojtaba Khamenei may never officially become a supreme leader. Plans change. Circumstances shift. The assembly of experts may yet surprise the world. But the fact that this conversation is even happening, the fact that the most powerful seat in Iran is being openly discussed as a family inheritance, says everything about how far the Islamic Republic has drifted from the ideals it once claimed to stand for. And the Iranian people are watching. The world is watching. And history, as it always does, is taking notes. This has been a full breakdown of one of the most consequential and underreported political stories unfolding in the world today. If this kind of deep, clear, no-nonsense news coverage is what someone has been looking for, this channel delivers it regularly. Subscribe, hit the bell, share this with someone who needs to understand what is really happening in Iran, because the mainstream will move on to the next headline tomorrow. But this story is far from over.